Hello everybody, in today's video we'll be discussing the hammer and anvil battle tactic that was used at the Battle of the Redgrass Field during the First Blackfire Rebellion. And more specifically, Maekar, and why Maekar deserves more praise for his role in the battle and what was ultimately the deciding factor in the war. Now, if you want more details and more in-depth coverage on the Blackfire Rebellions or the characters involved in the rebellions, I'll link a few videos down below that go into great detail. There's plenty of good channels out there that cover the rebellions as a whole. To understand his role in the battle, we must first understand Prince Maekar as a person. Maekar was the fourth son of King Daeron II Targaryen. His father the king was never quite the warrior, but both Maekar and his older brother Baelor by and large made up for that fact with their feats in battle and in tourney. Even at such a young age, it was well known around the court that Maekar would make an implacable warrior. He had the stern, unyielding, unforgiving attitude of a wartime general, and in due time, he would be. But at the same time, he didn't make friends very easily. He's not someone you would go out in town with and, have a drink around King's Landing and ride through the city and stuff like that. But in a battle, he's definitely the man you want next to you, or he's definitely the man you want leading you. Say now, is that starting to sound like someone we know in the main series of A Song of Ice and Fire? If you thought of Stannis Baratheon, you'd be right. Now, this isn't the first time this comparison has been made in the fandom, but as you may have picked up on, that Stannis has very similar personality traits, and both him and Maekar both have the bend before you break type mentality, and so that it's a very good parallel for the both of them, and also being very good wartime commanders, it definitely works. Okay, now I'll discuss the armies and the commanders on both sides and some of the key events that lead up to the ultimate hammer and anvil topic that I want to talk about. But it is important to understand the circumstances that lead up to that ultimately deciding factor. So we'll start with the rebels. The rebels are obviously led by Daemon Blackfire, great bastard of King Aegon IV, and his number one general Bittersteel, who also great bastard of Aegon IV. Daemon led the center or the vanguard of his army. Obviously, Daemon was lead from the front type of guy. Like he's the first guy leading the charge. Bittersteel was in charge of the right, in command on the right, and Lord Costane from the Reach was in command on the left. Now, bouncing over to the Loyalists, in the vanguard we had Lord Donald Arryn leading the vanguard. The Arryns have always been very loyal to the Targaryens, so that's no surprise. I'm not sure who leads the right and the left, but I would imagine it's one of Daeron's Kingsguard or one of the other prominent lords close to King's Landing or loyal to the Targaryens. But if any of you guys know, let me know in the comments. But all of Bloodraven, Maekar, and Baelor would all have a role to play. Bloodraven would undoubtedly be leading his Raven's Teeth and any other archers at the battle, while Baelor was rushing from the south with his Stormlanders and Dornishmen to join the army, while Maekar was in the vanguard with Lord Donald Arryn, probably second in command due to his age, as he was pretty young at the time. But the Loyalists were the defending army and defending the road to King's Landing, so the rebels had to make the first move. So Daemon led his vanguard to meet Lord Arryn's vanguard, and the two centers of the armies met. An intense battle took place in the middle of the Redgrass Field, and in the initial blow, Lord Arryn was slain. In the early parts of the battle, it looked like Daemon's ferocity and Daemon's vanguard had won the day. But as we know, a sudden change of events would turn the tide back towards the Loyalists. As Bloodraven took up a flank position upon the Weeping Ridge, he shot down Daemon and 2 of his 7 sons on the battlefield. In that moment, some of the rebels started fleeing, but Bittersteel would rally his troops and lead a mad charge. But also, the Loyalists were in panic as well, because they had lost their commander. Next up to the plate, you betcha, Maekar Targaryen, Prince of Summerhall. At this point in the battle, momentum has shifted a few different times. Commanders and generals have been slain on both sides, with new commanders taken up in their places. Bittersteel has picked up Blackfire, the Targaryen ancestral sword, and is rallying the rebel forces for a second charge. Meanwhile, Maekar is rallying the loyalist forces to form a defensive shield wall. Now imagine you're a common soldier on the front line, and you've barely survived the first charge. Commander slain, panic is happening, not just within yourself, but across the lines. You see soldiers throwing down their swords and retreating before the second charge, and you're wondering to yourself, should you join them in retreat, or should you stay and fight? And just as you ask yourself that, here comes Prince Maekar in a booming, roaring voice. Get back in line! Reform! Reform! Shield wall! Shield wall! And there he is, the young prince leading the way when the day was looking to be lost. And like I've mentioned before, if Maekar is commanding you to get back in line, you're going to do it. He has that authoritative respect and leadership that the men are going to do what he commands. Maekar forming the shield wall was not only a timely decision, but it was the perfect one. And it shows why he was considered a prodigy on the battlefield and would later in his own right become an astute commander. Putting the shield wall between them and King's Landing is basically saying, alright Bittersteel, you come attack me and we're going to hold this ground at all costs. No matter what happens, we're going to minimize our casualties, and right here, right now, this is the deciding factor. And it takes someone of Maekar's personality and that type of resilience that, again, I'll bring it up, that bend before you break mentality to lead the men in this way, and was considered a crisis. I mean, this was the deciding act on the war. So if you've ever seen The Last Kingdom, they depict the shield wall brilliantly. It's rows of men with overlapping shields to protect themselves. The first row will crouch down and use their shield to protect their legs and lower torso. Second row, standing up, protects the first row's upper torso and head, while the third, fourth, and fifth rows protect the heads of the rows in front of them. This defensive position is really hard to attack, as your archers don't have room to hit shots and pick people off at range, and for your cavalry force, horses aren't willingly going to charge a shield wall that has masses of men and shields, and this breaks the momentum of your attack. That's why cavalry are best used as a flanking device. We'll come back to that point. Now, what this leads to is essentially two armies meeting in a very close area, hundreds, maybe thousands of men in close combat. You don't quite have the room to have your full swings or use your maces. It's going to be a lot of short sword, a lot of stabbing, a lot of daggers. It's very bloody work in a shield wall battle. It's not shock and awe battle where you swoop in and you annihilate a portion of the army in minutes. It's very drawn out. It's very tiresome, and usually it's not usually the side that has the most men win. It's usually the side that works the best together, and that comes down to leadership and chemistry. Maekar and the remaining of the loyalist forces have buckled down and they have held the ground. This is where Maekar deserves all the praise in the world. He has restored the hope and the morale across the battle lines. He's comprised his unit into a good defensible position, minimizing casualties, and most importantly, buying time. He's not necessarily, doing the most damage, but he's buying time for his brother to come up from the south with his Stormlanders and Dornishmen. And let me remind you, this is no meager feat that he can hold this line for hours. This is Bittersteel, I remind you. This guy was the greatest threat to the Iron Throne for the next 20 to 30 years in multiple rebellions. This is a young prince rallying the troops to defend essentially the whole entire kingdom in one act. As you can tell by my wonderful artwork, we've arrived at the proverbial hammer and anvil. After hours of fighting, Baelor's rolled up on the scene with his Stormlanders and Dornishmen, and with Maekar acting as the anvil and taking the brunt of the attack, this buys time for Baelor to flank Bittersteel and the rebel army, and in one quick attack, in one fell swoop, the coordination of Maekar and Baelor has saved their father's kingdom, and has officially ended the First Blackfire Rebellion. Now, survivors would be able to flee, including the General Bittersteel, but this act brought an end to the First Blackfire Rebellion and kept King Daeron's throne safe. Now, both brothers deserve their praise for their efforts in the battle, but it's typically Baelor who comes out on top in terms of popularity and fame from this battle, as he was the one who came in at the right time to get the killing blow on the rebel army, which it's a more glamorous act than being the one who holds the ground and buys time to enable Baelor to get into that position. And as you expect, being a younger brother, this would lead Maekar to be a little bit salty that his older brother got the acclaim and fame from this battle. Yet again, another comparison to Stannis. Stannis was always jealous, looking up to his older brother Robert and how everybody loved him. In conclusion, the historians and lords will never give the credit that is due to Maekar. Without his decision-making and prowess on the field, we might be looking at a Blackfire king today, and Westerosi history would be changed evermore. The common soldiers on that eventful day on the red grass field got to see a young warrior prince transform before their eyes into a worthy general. And in due time, Maekar would level up one more time into a worthy king.